Hello. Let us take a look at the following question. How do you learn to read? Most of us can understand the kind of context we would reply with. Then, what if I realized I made a mistake with the question? Instead of the word how, I meant to say why. So now the question is, why do you learn to read? It should be obvious that such a correction significantly changes our possible answers. But wait, let's say later on I found another inaccuracy, and it turns out that I didn't mean to use the term learn, instead I meant hate. And now I suppose I could have meant to say, why do you hate reading? And if this error and correction continues, it would seem like we were in a position of not being able to do much. Every term of every statement could mean any other term for any other statement at any given time. Even if or when the terms are accurate, we would have a hard time recognizing it. The instability of the values of a statement creates a random nature. Simply put, we would say that each statement could mean anything, but not because that's what the terms of the statement express, but actually because of what the terms don't express. And we would traditionally say that such statements make no sense. So yeah, sure, technically they could mean anything. However, this is usually not the case for us. When we make statements, whether they are right or wrong, we can at least recognize and understand the terms we are using to express our statements. For example, when I asked the question, how do you learn to read? It was supposed to be understood that I meant every term I used, including the question format, etc. This is given for any statement, that relative to my intention, all terms of my statement are true. Traditionally, we find many of these issues in the natures of translation. It's very difficult to critique a piece of work if percentages of the material are missing or misprinted. Terms that are left out can completely change the meaning of the piece of work. In our example, when I used the word how, I meant the word how. If this is not given for all my terms, then there is no relation for my statements, which is just a fancy way of saying that my statements are gibberish or irrational. We can also say such statements are unstable, inaccurate, or ineffective, etc. Therefore, before we can accept such statements, we must consider all its terms to be true in and of themselves. Before any term may be applied to the nature it suggests, it must be true to itself. This is a fundamental identity which defines that all things equal themselves. And all things do so by identifying themselves through a relationship with themselves. We represent this relationship as A equals A. Before anything can ever equal anything else, it must equal itself. Before it cannot equal itself, it must equal itself. This holds true for our statements as well as statements that existence makes, which we could fundamentally describe as possibilities. So we start to see that in order for there to be anything, there has to be an identity about whatever anything is, or could be, as well as whatever could or does relate to that anything. This is also by definition of existence. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. We understand that this identity is a relationship about itself. This also shows us that all things define themselves through this relationship, and that all things define each other through this relationship as well. Fundamentally, this identity can be two-split to represent all its possibilities. If all things did not equal themselves, even if we have no idea what they are or what their equal is, they would have no relation to themselves, which we understand to be like our earlier example, turning into gibberish. Without a relation to itself, it can have no relation to anything else. In terms of our earlier example, we can simplify the idea as, I can't ask you to deposit $500 and then get mad at you because when I said $500, I meant $1,000. The same is true if I owe you $1,000. I cannot pay you $500 and then call us even. We're not even, at least not at face value. Then in this example, face value is the equivalent of in and of itself. When you lent me $1,000, we agreed to the definition of $1,000. $1,000 equals itself, and so does the term loan or owing or paying back, etc. Once we accepted this truth, we can further relate to its truth. Commonly, we relate through relationships that continue to define the value of $1,000. Some of these relationships could be me giving you a piece of property that reduces the value of me owing you $1,000, or me providing services to you, or perhaps you loan me more money which would increase the value of my debt, etc. Simply put, for these examples, a term that does not equal itself creates inaccuracy by miscommunication, and everything related to it runs the risk of increased instability, some entirely, others in part. But in terms of a nature of existence, we may say that fundamental relationships are never inaccurate, because this kind of communication or miscommunication equals two things. Either it exists or it doesn't. And we know that if it doesn't exist, then it is no such thing. In fact, inaccuracy can only be an issue about things that exist. And in this sense, communication or miscommunication are values of the possibilities about things that exist. And the point is that all of this is done through relationships, which defines that all things relate to themselves. This is the fundamental nature of identity. And this is how relationships are possible in the first place. Because if it exists, then by definition, it is in relation to existence. Its most fundamental relationship will be the value of itself, which is its proof of its existence. A equals A. Let us stop here so we may elaborate in the next video. Thank you.